Welcome to This is SA Explained. The Madlanga Commission resumed once again with its proceedings, and guess who? This time around, Julius Mkhwanazi, once again back at the stand. This time, he was being questioned about the EMPD officers who were under his command, right? Who worked under him. Quite a funny moment before he started with tissue that was stuck on his head, and while there was a light moment with everyone chuckling, Mahla got into it by firstly probing about his mother, who he said he was going to bury in March, and therefore that's the reason why his testimony couldn't continue. As far as we understand, Julius had said that he was going to a family bereavement and his mother had died. But fast forward a couple of, weeks later, the evidence leader, Mahla actually found out that the woman, the so-called mother who he was burying, was 10 years older than him. So that questioned the age gap as well. And from there onwards, Home Affairs records showed that this was, of course, not Mkhwanazi's mother. Mkhwanazi justified it by saying this was his stepmother, and he said that she had moved in with his father after, obviously, his father had separated with his mother and pretty much raised him, right? Raised him, and he regarded her as his mother. Well, in African culture and customs, a stepmother will be a mother, stepbrother will be a brother, stepsister will be a sister. As you know, we regard that as immediate family members and family. However, legally in this kind of context, it did not count. And from what we heard, the commissioners were actually saying he could be found to be in contempt if he does not, of course, justify or explain what he meant. So now, Mkhwanazi will have 2 days after he had testified to submit a supplementary affidavit explaining what had happened. So more troubles for him as well. But it wasn't just there, right? He was questioned on a number of issues, and the commissioners actually highlighted the fact that EMPD officers under his leadership were on a frolic. They were acting independently. They were going on unauthorized, operations, one of which included the Emmanuel Mbenze case, where Julius said he was woken up at 2 a.m. by whistleblower information giver Yaku Hanekom, who we understand as well was assassinated or killed or murdered, right? And from there onwards, Julius says when he got there, he reprimanded the officers as to why they called him. So in the evening, when there were other officers such as SAPS and other law enforcement agencies, and he left. Only to find that news would later break that the 52-year-old Emmanuel Mbenze was murdered on the 22nd of April, 2022 at a nearby dam, and his body was alleged to have been dumped there. I mean, after he had been allegedly tortured and tubed. And from what we know, we now have established that Mr. Mbenze, of course, during that night was questioned. At some point, witness D, known as Marius Panamerva, who died, said that this particular individual had made it clear that he's got 500,000 rand in the house and he had illegal goods in his truck, according to Mr. Panamerva. But at this current juncture, Mkhwanazi says he was not part of that cover-up. He didn't instruct anyone to load the body in the truck and dump it. And he further claimed that he knew nothing about this. He, in fact, told the commissioners that he reprimanded the officers who were part of this raid, including Aidan McKenzie and, of course, Kesha Lee Stalls as well. But the commissioners felt as though that was a lenient punishment whatsoever. For the fact that he was woken up at 2 a.m. and he was working on that very same day, the commissioners thought, Mkhwanazi could have taken a harsher stance and a penalty against his officers. But what makes it even much more worse, this operation was not even recorded or written down on paper whatsoever, right? So it meant that there was no compliance. You can't go back. It was not filled in onto an OB, documentation, not in the EMPD system whatsoever. And, it now questions really, what were these EMPD officers doing? By the way, they had been allegedly arrested before for a case that took place It could be in Merton, if I stand to be corrected, where copper was stolen. They were also found to be wanting in another case as well, which included precious stones, where they now even acted outside their jurisdiction, where they would be questioning suspects in Johannesburg. And I must say, you are allowed to do that, right? If you're on a hot pursuit, for example, you're chasing a car that's been hijacked, you can do that. You can do that, but you'd have to register the case at a nearby police station and notify them as to reason as to crossing over into an area of your jurisdiction. That's allowed. You can go to a police station if you're working in another area and have it be escorted by the police in that area as well. But what was to the commissioner's attention is that this time around, none of that happened. In fact, at some point, Mkhwanazi went to this house in Randburg and in Rosebank, as we understand, and started speaking to some of the officers who were there, Aidan McKenzie. In the beginning, Mkhwanazi didn't tell the commission that he went to this particular raid or operation. No, it was an operation rather. But footage showed him in a car communicating with one of the officers. And what that meant was that he had omitted the truth. In fact, at that point in time, he then admits that indeed, yes, he was with one of these officers. And what we know is that the city is now facing a lawsuit because of this, and they're being sued a lot of money for this, in millions, due to this particular incident. So again, takes you back to the points that Mbuyiseli Madlanga made, the chairperson, to say these officers were on a frolic, right? They were accused of running a lot of rogue operations, including stealing of cigarettes as well. And this really was happening on numerous occasions, targeting trucks, amongst others. And they're believed to have been, within a criminal enterprise. One would also say, when they went to Rosebank, they were going to commit armed robbery, as suggested by Commissioner Sandile Khumalo as well. So the optics really were bad and against Julius. It didn't just end there for Mr. Mkhwanazi, who, by the way, has been suspended, right? As the deputy chief of EMPD, he had to explain about his relationship with Medicare 24 CEO, Mike van Wyk, who we interviewed on ENCA exclusively. And he told us about his relationship with Mkhwanazi. But we know that, again, Mkhwanazi had signed a memorandum. On this memorandum, a number of approvals were made, including the fitting of blue lights and red lights in vehicles. This is why Vusi Musikat Matlala's cars were registered on the eNators system within the Ekurhuleni Metro Police Department. And later on, these cars were fitted in with blue lights. You would see videos circulating on social media where he would then, his girlfriend or partner would be seen in one of these cars as well, as extensively reported by News 24's Jeff Wicks as well. So it's a story that's been also widely covered by the media. And what we now know is that this was the beginning of new troubles. I mean, Cat VIP was working during the State of the City address in 2022. We've seen that picture where Mkhwanazi is, of course, with Mr. Matlala. And they were plotting and planning without the approval of some of the senior subordinates. So this memorandum was irregular, right? Because we've heard voice clips where Mike van Wyk is actually even asking Mr. Mkhwanazi for assistance to say, listen, my boss is worried that he's driving around a blue car with blue lights. He could be, arrested. What's the update? And Mkhwanazi will say he's working on it. And that they are registered in the system, just not as EMPD officers or something like that. And the voice notes go on and on and on, where Van Wyk is really pressurizing and asking Mkhwanazi to have the authorization for these lights as well. And when he was questioned about this, Mkhwanazi tried to deny this. But there was a memorandum which he signed, which authorized this. And it wasn't the only thing. We know about police peacekeepers who would come to the city, and there were volunteers from Van Wyk's company, and they would get job cards or peacekeeping cards, and it meant they would be on a free roam within the city of Ekurhuleni, right? They would be able to to embark on raids and operations, execute a warrant with the warrant of arrest, and within the absentia of a warrant of arrest. all of this, which was questioned, was the procedure and the irregularities of how everything was done. So it was really a tough week for him, a quite shocking revelations beyond acceptable standards. He came for 3 days, and in that 3 days, things just got worse for him. In fact, I believe that the commissioners may even have prima facie evidence to challenge him. We know that currently he's facing 13 charges in a different labor dispute where he is fighting to keep his job, but that might not go his way given these revelations of the commission. And in fact, what we know is that the Metro is just waiting for the final outcome of that procedure, the labor dispute, before they can take a decision. And many say he could just be on the chopping board and, pretty much fired as well for what he has done. He has ruined his career. And what came across here is a person who advances financial interest over his career. We saw about the number of monies that came into his account from Yaku Hanukom, from other people. Vusi Cap Matala sent him money as well. And look, the optics really were not good. I mean, with Yaku Hanukom, he says that they had a business. He invested into that business 100,000 to sell cars, and Yaku Hanukom sent him back that money. But, given what we're seeing, the inference is that some of these cops and, of course, Yaku at times were on these operations. And there were also allegations that at times things were going missing, like goods were not being registered on the books. So, records were not there, and it begs to differ. Then where did the money or the record or the goods go to, which were meant to be registered? But he will be back again. His testimony has been postponed for now. He'll be back again. We don't know when. He has to, of course, finalize. And we know the video where he's this time around inside the same room with Mike van Wyk, where van Wyk says that he was trying to introduce him to someone who had issues with getting to the airport. And we don't know where that story comes from. That guy was trying to get to the airport and he needed assistance. So we'll get more into that when the commission comes back. But today, I'd like to speak about something. Well, now the commission is, of course, Gareth Mnisi, right? 9 years he's been in government since 2009, and he's quite articulate, very also intelligent when it comes to familiarizing himself with the accounting systems, procurement and supply chain, but he's at the center of wrongdoing. He's accused of sharing sensitive information with Sergeant Fani Nkosi. Remember the guy, right? The guy who has been arrested, the guy who was at the center of everything, of peddling information between General Sibiya and, of course, other taxi bosses such as Stephen Mutsumi and Jothan, the late taxi boss Jothan Mswazi Msibi. But the commissioners here heard from Nkosi. He was unpacking about the systems in the city of Tshwane, about how contracts are awarded. This is a person who was a BAC chairperson, so obviously of the bid evaluation committee, which analyzes and looks at whether the company does qualify for this tender. The bid adjudication committee then approves, and that's where Mnisi was chairing. And he would obviously then give the final approval, right? And he was being questioned about some of these companies that got work in the city of Tshwane, some of which weren't compliant. Others were getting irregular ad hoc services to the tune of about 14 million rand. One of the companies, which was also at the center of the allegations, is Gubi's 85 Solutions, Pty, that director, Calvin Mahlangu as well. So Mnisi is expected to come back again on Monday, but it's going to be tough for him. He has to explain why was he sending sensitive tender documents to Sergeant Nkosi. I mean, he says that Sergeant Nkosi was part of the coordinators of his security detail, but the commissioners seem to not have been buying it. Why was he communicating with Nkosi about tender dealings, about Nkosi's brother's company, Ngapashaya, not being within or being a vendor that's registered on the Tshwane system to get work, and amongst the list of companies which were given, which were taken from Umashi Dlamini, TMPD deputy commissioner, also in suspension. These companies linked to the EFF that wanted work in the city, and that communication with Mnisi as well. So that's what he will have to answer. Whether he can answer or not is something which the commissioners will have to evaluate. While he is, of course, quite sharp when it comes to procurement systems and familiarizing themselves with treasury regulations and understanding the Municipal Finance Management Act, many have questioned as to whether that kind of intelligentsia was used to aid and abet and enable the abuse of the procurement system in the city of Tshwane. I am Pule Letshwiti-Jones. This is SA Explained. And of course, we'll be back again with more from the Madlanga Commission and more guests to detail explosive evidence here.